So let's get started. Good afternoon. Okay, it's March 6th. We are already in March. March 6th, 2024. Time is 4:01 p.m. Board members in attendance are Director Bankers, Director Gary, Director Nelson, Director Maltacom, Director Art, Director Jurgensen, and Hayfree. All 7 board members are in attendance. Superintendent Gall is running about 5 or 10 minutes late. He is driving from a school on the West End. He just texted me and he said he would be joining us soon. In attendance are also several district personnel, and we also have some other community members joining us, and I will set the agenda up and give a brief introduction, and we'll then dive into the first agenda. And the first item on the agenda is Board of Education Communication Services. To provide some context for the community, since 2021, when the previous board got seated, through our board priorities, which are on the wall up there, there was a concerted effort to improve communication from the board itself to various stakeholders. There was a general sentiment at that time, the work of the board and the discussions at the board meeting was not reaching effectively our staff and parents, and if it was reaching, the message was getting distorted by the time it went to them. And we also wanted to, the priority was to make the board more accessible to the public. And this started with periodic newsletters that the board at the time sent out, and the board also made a commitment collectively to visit schools and engage with staff and students. All the newsletters that were sent out over the past couple of years, they are all archived on the board website for the community to see. The newsletters evolved over time to incorporate even a more visually appealing format. Initially, it was just letters, and now it's more with pictures and stuff. But the challenge was these newsletters was primarily dictated to a large extent by my schedule, and as the compilation of the newsletter started with me, and then it went to the board members for input, and it got time consuming. And more importantly, the concern was it was not proactive or delivered in a timely manner for our stakeholders. By the time it was delivered, there were rumors and hypotheticals that were circulating in the community, and we were trying to put out the fire rather than get in front of the fire and stop it from happening in the first place. And this challenge came to the forefront, especially last year during negotiations, when based on the narratives that were circulating in the community and the resulting actions, it resulted in the district having to close one of our high schools for a day because we did not have enough staff to provide quality instruction. And that was kind of a tipping point, as now the lack of proactive communication is directly impacting classroom instruction for our students. And the board has clearly said that students come first, and we don't want to impact classroom instruction in any way or form. And that comes with a cost for our students, and not only the financial cost, but the cost for our students. And so essentially the need became more evident for a clear, consistent, and timely communication strategy, and that is not dependent on an individual board member schedule, especially if the lack of communication is lack of proactive communication is impacting students in the classroom. And after this recent November election, the need was validated by this current board, and that in this current charged political environment, we should not put our internal communication staff at the district at the forefront of delivering the message of the board. We need somebody from outside, and then the district initiated a comprehensive RFP process defining the scope and expectations for the work involved. It was an open call for all firms. Director Bankers and Director Hayfree served on that committee along with Dr. Jessica Weiss too. And the firm selected AdPro, and you guys are in the room. I will come to you in a minute. Before I come to you, Director Bankers and Director Hayfree, is there anything that you would like to share in the interest of keeping the community apprised about the RFP process that took place, what your feedback was from it, what your thoughts are. Essentially, either one of you can jump in and talk about that process without divulging too many details because of confidentiality agreements.
And there is a point to going through that process so that we are as comprehensive as we can in detailing the needs and wants of the expected performance when we hire an entity, whether that's this particular case or any of them. And so with the input from the board members, from input from staff members who are experienced in this, we came up with an RFP that seemed to meet the requirements, the needs, and the wants of the board going forward. So, given that, the RFP went out, it's public notice. Chris Odom can speak better to how that information is disseminated to the general public and to those who might be interested in applying. The responses come to us as a committee. Director Hafley and I both sat as representatives of the board. One with new eyes as a new board member, one with experienced eyes over the last 2 years, and put our heads together to go through the matrix that was provided and to individually go through each of the applicants. I assume they're called applicants. Go through each of the applicants' materials individually, score them individually, and then come together as a committee with what's your title? What's Chris's title? Chief Operating Officer. With the Chief Operating Officer and our invaluable. Whoop, she moved. I'm sitting right behind you.
You can join us,
They
Chris,
both moved.
if you want.
Having both of them there to make sure that we stay within the terms of the non-disclosure agreement so that we talk about being transparent and all of that, which is true, and yet there is a time at which we need to honor the confidentiality of firms that are applying. So once we have done that, we selected a list, we ranked them. We selected a list, we did not rank them. We called them for interviews of the top 3 who percolated to the top of the list, and then interviewed them, then again individually scored our responses to their responses to what we were asking of them, and then we met as a committee again and had a conversation, and after much deliberation and great applicants from which to choose, and it really speaks well, I think, of District 11, that we get such high quality applicants who come or respond to our RFPs, not only in this case, but the others that have come through in the last 2 years. And we made our selection, and hence we are at a point at which we're going to meet the folks.
Awesome. Anything else you want to add, Director Hafley?
Ditto. I being on the other side of this last year, in the classroom, there was information that was disseminated to the staff that wasn't entirely
Accurate?
Yeah, accurate's a good word. And as a result, it left staff believing in things that weren't exactly true. And so that was one of the pushes for me personally, that the board needed some help, and the district as a whole needed some help in making sure that factual, accurate representation of what was going on was disseminated to staff and the public on a regular basis in several different formats, different modalities. And so I'm glad that we're moving forward on that. Looking forward to you guys getting involved.
Okay, just to summarize, the process was rigorous, thorough.
Absolutely, yes. So we did have a rigorous process. We created an RFP for this task, as Dr. Bankus had mentioned, and it involved many people and several different firms. And in the end, we had several different firms bring us responses to that RFP, and we interviewed, as Dr. Bankus said, that we had interviewed those, and AdPro was the firm that rose to the top of that.
Great. I know that public are watching, so that's why I want to be dotting the i's, crossing the t's, that the process was rigorous, thorough. It was open for all, anybody could have applied for it, and you went through a process where you rated, you interviewed, you went through the process, you answered questions, all of it. I'm sure one of the questions wasn't about the political affiliation of the organizations, because we don't care about the political. It's based solely on the competence and performance on what they deliver to us. With that, Ms. AdPro, I want to introduce the AdPro staff, and we have your title is CEO? The president. Okay, great. President of AdPro, Ms. Camille Blakely. Please introduce your team, and then I know that you have a presentation for us. Superintendent Gall, thank you for joining us. Is there anything you want to add before I turn it over?
No, it sounds like I came in right at the summary, and I appreciate the recap.
Okay.
The district has partnered with AdPro on some of the work that we did last year on specific advertising for our market enrollment campaign. And it was, we certainly see great synergies in them rising into this opportunity for another engagement with the district.
Perfect. Introduce yourself and your group.
Sure will. Thanks for having us. It's great to meet everybody. I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves. And I'm Camille Blakely. I'm the president of AdPro, and I will give an overview and then talk about the project and some of the work we've done. Our presentation will be about 10-15 minutes. Then we'll open it up for questions. Okay.
I'm Amy Gillentine. I am the Deputy Director of Communications at AdPro, and I will be the day-to-day contact as far as writing, editing, interviewing for the newsletter goes. So that will fall to me. I'm very excited and happy to get started.
My name is Nikki. I'm an account coordinator, and I'll be helping on the back end of the account.
I'm Caitlin, and I am the senior account executive for the account, and I will mostly help with organization and day-to-day contact as well.
I'm Lindsay Kroon. Previously, I served as the communications director for AdPro, so I'll be Amy's backup and currently serve as the group account director.
I'm Kimberly Way. I'm the integrated media director, and I'll be available for anything overseeing with media, web, digital, or traditional media.
Thanks for having us. I'll give you a little bit of an overview of AdPro. The presentation's up on the screen. We're also going to pass it out, as well as just an example of a newsletter we've done for another client, so you can kind of see some of our work. You're welcome to go to our website, adproresults.com. Anytime you want to see any of our work, all of our clients are on there, and a whole bunch of different kinds of work that we've done, from video to PR to print media and branding, everything under the sun. So AdPro, we've been around for 12 years. We're local. We have 40 employees, and we are truly a full-service ad agency. We're kind of a throwback, guys. You don't see full-service ad agencies as much anymore, but we truly do everything in the marketing space and have experts in every aspect of marketing. We have a research department. We do PR. We do audio and video production. We have all of our facilities in-house and on-site. We do traditional media, like we still do a lot of TV and radio and billboards and print. And then about half of what we do is digital media. Everything from organic social media posting to SEO, SEM, paid social, all sorts of digital products. And we have website design and development as well. So truly full service. We are owned by Phil Long Enterprise. So half of what we do are Phil Long's dealerships, nonprofits. Mount Carmel Veteran Service Center is a very big client of ours, and all the nonprofit work that Phil Long does here and in other markets in Colorado. And then the other half is a wide variety of clients. We do a lot of education. We do tourism. We do a lot of nonprofit marketing. We work with UC Health. Varied and a lot of variety. So you can see the overview that we have here. Being full service is one thing that makes us very different, and the fact we do everything, we collaborate so much in-house. So when it comes to strategy and branding, there's a lot of consistency and quality control because we're all working on the same page. Secondly, we're local. We're 10 minutes from you guys. So most of our clients are here in Colorado Springs along the Front Range. We do have clients all over Colorado and other states, but most of it's here in the Pikes Peak region. We've worked in K-12 education for many, many years. We also work with Pikes Peak State College and Trinidad State College. So we kind of have run the gamut when it comes to education. We have people with deep experience. Amy was on the other side of the fence, so she's especially valuable to you guys because she was the publisher of the Business Journal and the Indy and all those publications. And so she has knowledge of both sides of the table, which is really valuable to us. And so she'll be your lead daily on getting your message out. We're also invested in this community. We serve on a lot of boards. We have a lot of nonprofit and business clients in the market, and we're very, very tied to the community. A lot of us live in District 11. A lot of us have raised kids here, so we're very connected to what you guys do. And the other thing you should know about us is we're accountable and we're transparent, and we're stewards of your money and your brand, and we take that very seriously. We love working collaboratively, and with in-house teams and with boards, because we think the best marketing is when we come to solutions and strategies together. So that's kind of an overview of AdPro. We'll talk about some of the work we've done with the District 12 staff, because go ahead.
District 11.
11.
What did I say?
12.
Oh, sorry, my kids were raised in D12, sorry. So what we really see our primary role is to amplify the voice of the board. From the research we've done in preparing for the RFP and in our initial meetings with you, there's so much you guys are doing that is incredible that people don't know about. That's our first instinct, okay? And there's so much good there that we want to shine light on, to make it very simple. And we feel like there's some really great strategic initiatives that we want to make sure that we get simplified and focus on, and mostly really put positive messages out. So simply, that's what we want to do, and communicate clearly and effectively and in a variety of ways, to your point, where people live. So, video is the currency of today. So you're going to hear us recommend that, and we can work with your team to help get messages out. We have to really think about who our audiences are and how we want to reach them effectively. So the RFP was about newsletters, right? And so we've had conversations where, because we're full service, we can provide things in many different ways, and know there's a lot of flexibility there. And we're very excited to get started.
All right, so me and Nikki are just going to go over a couple of the campaigns that were done for District 11 in the past year. So this is the first one we did. It was about a year ago. We came in and there was some information about students that were leaving the D11 district and going to D20 and D49. So we really focused in on the northeast quadrant of D11. We met with the principals at Doherty, Jenkins, Scott, Rudy, Freedom, and Martinez, and then we also had a focus group with students and parents, just kind of about, how they choose their children's school and then some of the student perspectives. And from that, we came with this postcard. It went out to 55,000 homes in a 2-mile radius of all of those schools. So we hit all of the homes in that area. And then we also created some displays that matched our messaging there, that the internal District 11 marketing team used in conjunction with our postcard.
That's digital displays, marketing.
And then following that up, we got some really great information and we did some comparison charts, and it was just to compare things like how many AP classes are in each district, the CTE programs, clubs, and all the activities that students can partake in. So we followed that first postcard up with another mailer. We targeted in a little bit more, and that went to families with kids between ages 4 and 18 to really make sure that the households had students within them. And then that again went to a 2-mile radius around the northeast schools in that quadrant, and that went to about almost 24,000 homes there.
For this one, Tesla Middle School moved and expanded its space, and being that they're the only in-person alternative middle school in the region, we started a direct mail campaign to communicate the benefits that they have to offer. We met with Jody, who is the vice principal, The postcard was mailed out to 4,000 homes. We targeted certain zip codes surrounding the school as well as houses that have children from ages 8 to 11. And then for Odyssey Echo, we met with the principal who wanted to do a direct mail campaign to increase enrollment. We focused on how students have the opportunity to either go to college and get an associate's degree for free, or they can go straight to the workforce. This was an 8.5 by 11 that folded into a postcard. We reached 4,000 homes within D11 and surrounding areas that have children from ages 13 to 14 in the household.
And then this was our most recent project. So this was a half-page ad in the Colorado Springs Relocation Guide. That guide has about 10,000 copies that go out throughout 2024, and it goes to like military bases, it goes out to realtors, and different kind of things like that where people are seeing new people come into the area. That's really where this is targeted. So it was a half-page ad accompanied with a 600-word article, and then there's also a directory listing online and some targeted ads as well that match the half-page ad.
So under our current proposal, we're looking at your weekly newsletters. And I've taken a look at what's on the website, and there's great information there. I would suggest maybe having that information in a more conversational, sort of narrative way. And some of the things that we are going to suggest for that first newsletter includes highlighting a teacher, celebrating teacher success, and sort of building that relationship with teachers to maybe a mini profile kind of thing. We would want to update on the budget, updates from your board meetings, decisions that you're weighing, decisions that you've made, some of the contract negotiation with the teachers from your perspective, the choice window, legislative updates, what's happening at the state and national stage as far as education and how it might affect teachers and students and parents. Your activities, where you've been and why. I know you said that was one of your priorities, and we've certainly seen you out in the community. I don't know that everybody knows how active and engaged you guys are. And so highlighting, hey, this is where we were, this is where we're gonna be, is so important. One of the things that impressed me listening to your board meeting is how passionate you guys really are about the kids. And that doesn't really come across in news articles or in communication. You really are a student-driven, first-driven board. And that's what we want to put forward in the newsletter. And then we know there's a town hall on Monday. Camilla and I are planning to attend, so we would do a recap for people who can make that. So here are some of the, here's one of our newsletters we do for Pikes Peak United Way. And so you can see a little bit different than what's currently there, short articles, photos, really colorful that will draw people in. And in the newsletter, if we want to do something longer form, we can link back to an article on the website and highlight more things that way.
We can also embed video in that, guys.
AdPro provides a variety of support in the communications and public relations realm, and strategy really undergirds everything that we do. So the first thing that we recommend with clients is a strategic marketing and communication plan. And this is where we can really dig deep. We can talk to you about your pain points. We can strategize together. It's something that we see as a collaborative process, but it also sets the tone for everything we do. We also have the capability of providing press releases, and we include comprehensive media relations support along with that. Our team, and I mentioned this during the RFP process, but our team doesn't simply send a press release and then passively wait. We're very active about sending press releases. If we send a press release, we're talking to media prior to sending it out, letting them know that's coming, checking in with them to make sure they got it, sending it again if it got lost in their inbox. We pursue those very aggressively in order to get the best results. Amy plans to attend one board meeting each month and coordinate with the D11 video team for board spotlights. We also talked about creating a digital media kit that could live on the website. This has been very helpful for us as we engage the media. It's kind of a one-stop shop. Media is under a lot of pressure these days, and a lot of times the reporters are younger and uninformed because this market tends to have a lot of media turnover. And if we can kind of provide a story that's ready to go, if we can provide factual information that's ready to go, we have a lot more success, and we don't have to go back to the reporters and have them correct their story. Providing media training, I recommend this for anyone. It's just really helpful to have training to work with the media. What our team likes to do is actually bring in video, and we like to support that media training with video so that you can kind of feel what it's like to be interviewed, and then we can play it back and offer critique. And then we can also provide supplemental social media content when needed. The strategic roadmap is something, and we're already along this road. We've already done some research and we've studied the market, the competitive landscape, and we provided our response to the RFP. We set some goals and outlined how those will be measured. Results, analytics, data are very important to us, and that really informs what we do. So we look at the target audience, who's looking at this, and we actually had some really good questions during that RFP process about who do you see as the audience? Who's most important? Is there a secondary audience, a tertiary audience? And then we design strategies and tactics specifically to accomplish those goals. Our plans are anchored with a timeline and budget, and we assess and adjust every month, but we work the plan all year. So we have that strategic plan that's overarching that we agree to and that we work through with you, but we're constantly assessing and adjusting. If something doesn't get the results we're looking for, we're gonna go back and we're gonna see why that happened and what we can change or what we can do and refine to get better results in the future.
Part of the reason we really like to come up with strategic roadmap together is because we need to speak with one voice, right? We have to really discuss priorities and talk about strategies and tactics and how to reach the goals you want to accomplish. But then speak with one voice, because then we're able to shine that light, as we've talked about, on that, as long as we're aligned. And having that roadmap keeps us on track. Often, a big part of our job with our clients is once we make smart decisions to remind people of the decisions we made and to keep us all on track. So that's a little overview of us and the work that we are going to be doing and can do for you. What questions do you guys have?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll just make a bridge and transfer because Thomas has the page open. We got a lot of heat for this in the community on being active in advertising the high quality of our schools. And I want to be clear that AdPro has demonstrated that they're willing to help us change a narrative of where we've been passive for over 2 decades. And choice has allowed families to make choices. We've been passively watching that happen. And the areas that are upset with us on these campaigns have been the receivers of our passivity. And so I appreciated last year in having a partner that was willing to stand up and say out loud, Doherty High School is a destination. It is a place for people to go, as are all our schools. And finding that message and using the programs that this board and previous boards have invested in for us to be proud of our district, and now to have the board to have an extension of that, to stop apologizing for doing the right things for kids.
And guys, the stories are out there. We interviewed principals, we talked to students, and we were inspired. And if we're doing our job right, we'll tell those stories. Any good marketing connects with hearts and minds, right? We've got to show the benefit of being in this school district and inspire people. And that's going to elevate spirits instead of bring people down. So that's really, really important. And I think there's a lot of great stories out there. And the other thing is we have to show what makes us different and not be afraid of it, not hide from it, but be real clear. Identifying that's part of the strategic plan. What are our differentiators? What makes us unique? Why should people choose us over everybody else? That's what we were doing. That came from a conversation where I was saying exactly that. And then we're like, let's show you. And you guys saw, and then you're right. Boy, did it communicate what's not there by the reaction, it's like, oh wow, there's a space to fill here with information, right guys?
Thank you again. Thank you for that overarching view of the support that you guys can provide. What Superintendent Gall talked about, another way of what this board wants is the status quo that we have seen in District 11 for the last 15, 20 years in terms of achievement being stagnant and enrollment dropping. That's what this board wants to solve essentially. That is our overarching priority. Students come first. And that's a message that we will work towards with you to deliver to our various stakeholders. Board, any thoughts, questions, feedback on what type of support you want to see them provide? They started with a newsletter. Do you have any recommendation as to what else is and you said that you can adapt it as we go along in the process, but for the first month, what would you recommend? That we start with the newsletter or anything else this month?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we want input from you guys, right? And I know that you'll be kind of our point person. We need to do a lot of listening, right? I've had some great meetings, we've had some great meetings, but if we're gonna be shining light on what you guys do, we need to learn. And so that's the first thing we wanna do. Amy has some initial instincts, so I just highlight those again that we might wanna do in this first newsletter. And we have a ton of ideas, but we wanna make sure we hear what's important to you guys first.
Thoughts and feedback. Who wants to go first? Anybody?
Well, I'll jump right in then.
Okay.
I'm very big on, we would get the newsletters last year and, which I believe came from you. And they were great, and it was probably the first time I.
Just for clarity, I would start with the initial draft. Other board members provided feedback after that, so.
Okay, thank you. So they would send out this email that included the newsletter of what the board was doing. And it took some time because there was input from all of the board in that. And so then when we get those newsletters over email, teachers don't always, and I hope I don't insult anybody, but teachers are difficult to teach to, okay? And teachers don't always necessarily read through they look at it and yeah, it looks pretty good and okay, that's great. And then that would be the end of it. And so when I became a member of the board, one of the things that I was talking about was, look, we need better communication with the public, with our staff. People need to know the greatness of this district. And I've been an employee of this district for 29 years of my 30-year career, and I didn't know some of the great things that were going on until I got into this role and got out to the schools and saw what they were all about. People don't know that. And so there's got to be different ways that we can reach people. There are people that are going to look at newsletters and take the time to read through it. There are other people that are more, give me a quick video that I can watch. Later on, maybe I can listen to a podcast while I'm cooking dinner or something. The idea is to provide as many different modalities as possible to hit the many different learning styles of our staff and of our community. That's what I'd like to see.
We hear you. And it's not just teachers, it's every
Yes.
human. They want sound bites of information, and we've been kind of trained that way, especially with how everybody lives on social media.
That's our society now.
To get their attention, we need to be brief and we need to be sometimes entertaining, guys. And some of these stories, let's have fun. Let's show you reading to kids. Let's show you how, there's going to be really great ways we can do it. And Jessica and I have talked about the way that we can work together, right? Where, let's say there's something difficult she's working on and she's spending her time and her staff really on the day-to-day getting things handled. We're going to be shining a light on all the great things that are going on, right? And be support there when we need to. But we're here for your voice. And there's a lot there that we can simplify and have people better understand the role you guys play.
I mean, going to that newsletters, sometimes those newsletters is filled with so much information. We go into the details. It's got a lot of meat on it,
Yeah.
but it then goes to 2 or 3 pages. And to Jill's point, teachers don't have the time. They look at it and say, oh, kind of this, and put it away. So how many of them actually read all the content in there? Maybe there is a way to simplify it, and maybe it's a newsletter's focus is on one item. I know that you suggested so many different things on it, which is fine. But, maybe there is a succinct way to get that in. But somehow we need to be able to deliver it in an easy to digest form, whether that is going to be newsletters or video snippets.
And whatever, we have to have a large visual element, because that'll pull people in, that's like a big photo, right?
Yeah.
Like a video, because what I said, we have to engage hearts and minds, that'll draw somebody in and then they'll read further.
I appreciate when you are thinking about who's the audience. We do have several buckets, and I think that can be a challenge sometimes. So as experts in your field, you'll be able to help. Maybe it's one section, we are speaking a little bit more to the staff, and another section is a little bit more parent oriented. But that is something that's been on my mind quite often, that we have to consider who our audience is. And I'm looking at the superintendent because I just had that conversation with him, and as his team presents to the board and public as they're viewing, what we can't take for granted. We do take for granted sometimes that we're in this in the day in, day out, especially the staff. As a board, we come once a week, but we discussed something months ago, so it's a little foggy. And then if you trickle that out to staff, parents, this is not on their mind all the time. So having that concept that we're gonna have to remind them and tell them again, I liked what you said, that we make good decisions, and to be reminded that we already did make that good decision, because that's very real.
And people love to play with marketing like it's crayons, right? There's a lot of money wasted.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's another reason for the strategic plan, is we will identify our audiences, but prioritize them too.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a newsletter that's, the primary focus is teachers, and the next time it might be kids, might be parents, you know what I mean? We can mix that up and have different highlights, but there has to be intelligence that goes with it. And then when we use analytics and metrics to see, we can see who's opening it, we can see what people are clicking on, we can evaluate, we rate ourselves and evaluate how it's working all the time.
And I would say being able to reach a broader community. I know we have community members, some that are sitting in the room right now, that aren't on our email distribution list because they're not a staff, they're not a parent,
Interesting.
but they're very invested in wanting to support. And so how do we allow or encourage access to those newsletters that they go sign up or push it to them, you tell us, but I think we could really broaden our scope of who we're reaching. And then as far as, in my mind, this is not to promote the board. This is, the board work is the district's work. And so we're about promoting what's going on in the district, and they should be one and the same. Like, what we're doing at the board level is to further the impact we're having on kids. And so I just really want to make that clear for me. It's not that I want my picture in every newsletter, not at all. I want the kids, I want, key decisions that are being made and why we believe they're the best decision for the students. And that we did get creamed in the last couple of years that I've been on the board, and lots of misinformation, and so I'm really excited that we can just be getting the facts out there, and in a way that people will be able to receive them more easily.
I'm just jumping on to what she said, a couple of things to add on. When she's talking about the community members that we need to reach, even though they don't have kids in the district, they are taxpayers that are supporting us.
Yeah.
So we need to be able to communicate to them. And secondly, I second what she said, the misinformation that is out there, the rumors, the innuendos, the suppositions, things that happen at the board meetings, somehow when it gets communicated on social media out there, they twist and spin it. And I know we are in a politically charged environment, and it is to promote their own political agenda, but they make it look like we did exactly the opposite of what we did. And that has to be factually communicated out there, clarity, that what is exactly happening, whether it is during a board meeting or employee contacts that happen throughout the thing. So
I hear you. We need to control the conversation, not just react.
and proactively.
Proactively, and with us perspective we can get, because you guys are in the weeds doing your jobs every day. We'll be thinking differently and looking for different things. But largely what we'll do is create content, right? So the content will be in newsletter form, but you can pull pieces of that you can use in other places that can be more public, like social media. So that's what's great is you can utilize that in a lot of different ways, digital ads, social media, even a video to show it in a meeting. So you'll have a lot of tools that will elevate you. But I love that you made that point of, this isn't about shining light on me and feature, no, it's about the work you're doing and how it ties to what the district is doing and how, when I talk about good marketing, it shows the benefit, how it's making children more successful.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
It's not that complicated, but we will keep that in mind and try to tie it together. So thank you.
Can you remind me how long the contract with your company is for?
Sure, we start with this fiscal year, so 4 months, right?
Chris has-
Go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Chris. Let the right person answer that.
So the contract start date is today. It will ultimately go through December 31st, 2025, based on the information I received from the board through the superintendent.
But it's broken down into.
There are option terms. It'll start March 6th and it'll end June 30th. We'll renew and start July 1st and go to June of next year. And then we'll start July 1 and end December 31st, 2025.
And each of that is optional, like we can, if necessary, terminate the contract at the end of any.
You do not have to renew any of the option terms.
Good, perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Do you have any more?
I was just gonna say, before Chris sits down, can you remind us how much it was?
Sure. So at the bid proposal sheet that we asked for all the vendors to price was to support the Board of Education with weekly newsletters. So everybody gave a little more opportunity in the event the board wanted to choose other offerings. So at a minimum, if you were to do all the weekly offerings, your monthly fee would be $4,200. There's opportunities to take those weekly newsletters out if there was a week you didn't want to do it and replace it with another effort. If they do no work, they don't get paid. Okay? So we put a little cap in there, so the total contract for this year period is $20,000. That's the cap.
Through
June 30, 2024.
Okay, thank you.
When you say weekly offerings, more than the newsletters? Or what are you?
Yes, for example, the strategic plan. If you want to sit down and build a roadmap for the efforts you want to work through this year and next fiscal year to clearly define your budget, that has an additional cost to it. You can either pay the additional cost or swap it out for something you might not feel you need for the week of spring break, hypothetically. Just giving.
So all the other things that are added in there, like if you give us media training for the board members, that would come with an additional cost.
Correct.
Okay.
Did that answer the question?
It sure did. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
You're welcome, my pleasure.
I'm sorry, so you're saying the 4,200 is not just newsletters?
That
Just
is the newsletters for a month. It's
So
a,
one newsletter a week, 4
Okay.
newsletters
Got it.
a month.
Thank you.
But we can remove one newsletter and put a video clip in there and maybe balance that cost out. But if we do 4 newsletters and anything extra, that would be extra.
so the newsletter is any modality of
Communication.
communication.
I think in your presentation, you said like attend one board meeting a month. Hopefully you somehow get apprised of what's happening at the other board meetings too. Maybe you're going to attend one in person.
And then watch it.
And watch the other or
We should have
whatever it is, because
articulated
there
that
are,
more, yeah.
you know,
Yes.
whether live you're going to watch it or whether you're going to watch it, recording or whatever. But sometimes there is benefit to being in the boardroom watching it because you get to see the whole thing play out, which sometimes doesn't translate into a video thing. But I'll leave it up to you. But it becomes if you don't watch it, then somebody's got to backfill you with that information as to what transpired at that board meeting. And so it's much easier if you or somebody on your team is watching and figuring what's happening at that board.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah.
You
I do. So you talked about accountability, transparency, analytics, evaluation. And I'm going to note, I had asked for, but we have not received a report from the last communications consultant. So how will you provide that information to us? And I'm still hoping we'll get that other one so we can compare if we're interested. I think this is a lot, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate that flexibility. And personally, I hope we don't do a newsletter every week, because I think that's almost too much for the community, like maybe every other week. But and I do like that flexibility, like I said. But going back, how will you report to us, like at 4 months, like here's what we've done, 6 months or a year?
It will come from the plan that we hope to do, that strategic plan, or even just a discussion where we set goals, okay? So obviously I would think, how many kids we add to the system would be the ultimate goal, right? But there's PR metrics, there's website metrics, there's open rates on the newsletter. So we would decide together, we'll come with a recommendation, but we want very tangible goals. Number one being, how many students do we add? I mean, we should be held accountable for that, okay? So we'll decide it together, and then we'll have it in this plan. Even if you guys don't want to pay extra for that planning process, we'll do a one-page sheet of here's our priorities, anchored by timeline, budget, so everybody knows what we're working on at all times. And then that really helps provide structure and accountability, and it'll be in black and white, and we'll decide it together. And that's how it's our report card, really.
I love that. Thank you.
So it sounds like we're gonna need more time together then?
Yeah, it depends. I think the smaller the group, the better, because this is, we'll start with real strategic conversations, and, we have to move quickly here because this is such a busy time for you guys. We know that we're coming into where we're gonna probably have a very, quick ramp up. So we don't want to spend a lot of time, and the tighter group, the better. So, we would probably, look to Director Hafley to give us some guidance on that. But we'd love to do it next week. Because we'd love, before we get too far down the road, to be on the same page. And so we know expectations, and then that gives us the freedom to really do our jobs, so.
So that gets the segue to the board, and I just want board guidance on this. As far as the point of contact for this communication that is going to evolve in this, the name that was suggested by some board members independently to me was that Jill, Director Vice President Hafley would be the ideal person. She's got some communications background. She's involved in communications even now with the work that she does on the side. So if the board is comfortable with it, she would be a point of contact with them. And as some of these newsletters and communications evolve, when there is a time constraint involved with it and we need to turn it around, instead of it coming to the whole board, it would come to her, and she would be the voice of the board. And to get the factual information right, you would also be in contact with Dr. Weiss if there is anything from the district side that needs to be clarified as far as numbers go, whatever it is. So
Yes.
we want to make sure when the message gets out, the information is accurate. So that would be the if the board is comfortable with that, if you're good with that. And then for this strategic session that you were talking about, if we can start that process with Vice President Hafley, and I can join in that conversation because I can talk on behalf of the board too. And then Superintendent Gall, would you be available to join?
Absolutely.
And then Dr. Weiss, you can join us. If the board is comfortable, we can at least start that conversation next week and then bring that information to the board and see what the next steps are. Would that suit your timeline?
That would be
Is the-
helpful, thank you.
Is the board good with that? Okay. Anything else at this point in time you want to communicate to AdPro and the team that is in there? Okay. Nothing. So thank you so much.
Thank
you
you.
for bringing your team here.
Thanks for your time, everyone.
Yeah, appreciate all of you. We look forward to this partnership. We look forward to the work that comes out of it. Like I said, our intent is to be proactive in the message that goes out and not react, and communicate the board work in a clear and concise manner.
Positive way.
Positive way. Yes.
Thank
you so much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for all of you. I mean, it looks like you brought quite a bit of your team here.
It's a whole team. It's wonderful.
Let's get started.
Chris, come on down. Cameron, you gonna join us? Where are you? There you are. Save the microphone.
I thought she was going to sit.
I got 2 words to intro.
Okay.
Attendance matters. Camera over to you and the entree of other folks who are going to give us great things to say.
And again, to provide more context to the community that's listening in, the board clearly indicated in a couple of retreats that we had that this policy, attendance policy, and also the discipline policy, those are 2 policies that we want to comprehensively address and make sure that there are clear revisions if necessary in those policies, more so that we provide clear guidance for all our schools. And that guidance is going to be standardized to all elementary schools, all middle schools, and all high schools. One of the things, I don't know if other board members notice it, sometimes when I go, the attendance or discipline in one school is not consistent with another school, what they follow. And maybe it's practice, maybe it's because there is no clear roadmap out there. Hopefully, this is kind of the start of the process where we can bring clear guidance to all the schools. And like what Superintendent Gall says, attendance matters. We cannot, we talk about best first instruction and quality instruction in our classrooms, but if students don't show up, it doesn't matter how effective our teachers are, the message isn't going to resonate. So with that, start the presentation, and then as we get to the policy itself, I'll provide some talking points to the board how we will proceed with that. But you got a few slides in the front first. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just quickly start us off by saying, just echoing what the superintendent said and what you just said, President Malpacum, attendance is key. And Dr. Colicky will go over a few slides on attendance, add a few talking points. And while it may seem like a fairly high attendance rate, really you have to have an even greater attendance in school to get the kind of results that we're trying to achieve. And then when you look entire across the system, the students that we have that are chronically not there, that's a real concern. If you're not at school, you can't learn. Also, the level to which the ease of implementation is very, very important as well. So the presentation, the few slides that we have for this, we'll go through the data. We'll go through, Chris will talk about the summary of the changes within policy. And then he will go deeper into one of our higher leverage attendance pieces with a couple of different options for the board to discuss and give direction on. And then we'll talk about feedback and feedback that you can give at this particular time and feedback that might come later as you dig deeper into the documents. With that, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Thank you. Dr. Colicky and I are going to kind of tag team the first few slides. He's going to address some of the data that he was able to gather and pull together for us.
Yeah, so what you're looking at here is just a basic overview, kind of put the conversation into a context. So a lovely scatter plot there. Love to see a slope like that. And so what you're seeing is, on the top one is, on both graphs, the x-axis is the mean attendance rate. These are our own data. On the top one is math, and on the bottom is ELA. These are CMAS scores. So these are CMAS scale scores is the unit of measure. You can see a very strong correlation, which isn't a terribly huge surprise. Attendance matters, as Superintendent Gall pointed out, and it matters pretty specifically and significantly. So both these are statistically significant relationships, but functionally, if we take a look at kind of that top level of about 92% average, so mean attendance rate of 92% and above, those are our highest performing schools. So on average, if you get about 8 out of 10 students that are performing at grade level or above, so if he meets on CMAS language, those are at our highest attendance schools, 92% and above, in both math and ELA. And those assessments do encompass both CMAS and PSAT, SAT, so just remember PSAT is our 9th and 10th grade state assessment, SAT is our 11th grade assessment. So it does matter, it is statistically significant, and also increases the chances of performing at grade level to a large degree. Go to the next slide.
Just a quick question on this. So just for clarity, each of those dots is a school,
Yes, correct.
and the size of the dot
Is the size of
size of the
school.
students.
Thank you for that clarification.
And then I'm going to cover the next slide in a little bit of detail. So this is the data that was reported to CDE for last school year, and gives you a snapshot of why attendance matters and our concern of how do we support and make this a priority for schools and students and families. Our overall district attendance rate last year was 88%. Our truancy rate was at 5.16%. And we had 4,500 students that met the definition for habitually truant. And then I think the one that sticks out the most for a lot of us is the chronic absence. And that's for individuals that had missed 10% or more of days. And that's at 43%. So we had 43% of our students miss 10% or more of their enrolled school days. So for an average 180-day school year, that would be they missed 18 days.
Excused or unexcused, it doesn't
This
matter.
chronic is excused or unexcused, that's correct. But if they're not there, they can't learn, and that's the concern.
How does this compare to state numbers, just for framing this data?
We were above state numbers, I can get that real quick.
Above in which direction?
Our numbers were, we had fewer students attending as a general compared to the state.
Above in the wrong way.
Above in the wrong way, thank you.
If
Yeah.
this chronic absence does include excused absences as well, what about kids that are on week-long trips like robotics? If they're gone for a week while they're competing and they're excused, I would assume that would be excused as a field trip. Is that part of that, or is that completely separate?
Chronic typically, as a general rule, it's almost all absences.
So it groups them in,
There
so-
are some exceptions, but generally capturing the essence of if a kid's not in the other classes for the robotics, they're going to have a harder time picking back up and learning the content that's being instructed to them during those days that they missed.
So are you saying if they go on a field trip, that's counted as a chronic absenteeism?
It's counted as excused absence.
Yes,
which
but
is
excused
counted
absence
towards
is
this.
chronic.
But it is counted towards that.
It's lumped in.
It's included in.
Okay.
So if you miss 18 days because you're a state level golfer, you're gonna be listed as chronically absent.
Okay.
Right?
But I think it's important to note, though, that in order to participate in golf or in robotics or in anything else, you have to be eligible.
Yes.
And you have to keep your grades up. So that's an important note to make, especially if the public is looking at, my goodness, 43% are chronically absent. Well, what exactly is that breakdown then? Are these kids participating in sports that and robotics? I mean, things that the district is providing for them, that's hard to swallow, that's counting against them.
Break it out by the
Unexcused.
chronic absence then equates to how many kids below grade level. What percent of chronically absent students are below grade level?
So I think if we go back one slide, and so if we just say, we did the math, and I think off of last year's number, 43% was about 9,000 students. Okay? And so now if we think about every high school student that we know, and the amount of times that we are not in class, because most of our activities are after school. Like you could go right up now to Coronado, the robotics club is there.
No, they're not.
They're not there today?
They left today for Oklahoma.
Okay, great. And so,
They'll be gone for the next 2 days.
Okay, and so they'll be gone for 2 days, because
Sorry.
most of the times those things will be a weekend. But like our basketball games are after school. It's not until you get outside of the normal way that we are active that you're really starting to regularly miss school. And so so I totally agree that the 9,000 isn't 9,000, but it's 7,500 solid. So 7,500 kids are missing 18 days or more that are likely at the 80 to 85% unexcused absence. So it doesn't split in the there's not a problem, and we correlate that because, you know, I love when David gets these slides because he comes in here and he smiles ear to ear. He's like, that slope of those lines tell you very clearly that there is a direct relationship, and if you read into it, it literally says every percentage point of did you say this? Every percentage point of attendance is 11 points on the testing scale.
11 points, yeah.
And so when you look at, well, 88%'s not bad. Like if my kid comes home with an 88, great, you got a B+. No, we don't even think about it that way. 92 to 95 is where schools should be at. Our district is at 88. So if you subtract out unexcused or excused, you still have a very significant problem. And that correlation says to you, the lower your attendance, the much lower your performance. Now, I'm not saying that attendance and performance are the only two variables in there. There are a lot of reasons why kids can't come to school that also are reasons why they might not be achieving. So it's not as simple as if every kid came to school, they do learn. But there's a very clear correlation that says if we can get tighter on policy on what we believe to be as attendance as a major lever, then we know that we'll see ourselves sliding up on that. But I would love for us to work with the state on being able to disaggregate that data on unexcused and excused. Because I do hear a lot from the high schools of, hey, actually, half of my chronically absent kids are actually my highest performers because they are competing in things like Oklahoma City robotics or state golf tournaments. Sorry, we met somebody I said golf 3 times. We met a teacher today at Grant, whose daughter is a golfer, and he's thinking that she's going to be in the States this year, and there's already a conflict with a school event. So I'm not just promoting golf.
This is jumping ahead. So the very last document that's uploaded in Board Docs has a grid at the bottom of it, and that was created to support schools, mainly attendance clerks that do a lot of the coding. It does describe which is included and which is not. It is the last couple of pages on that, and I can read which ones are not included, and field trips is actually one of the ones that's not. So in-school suspension, classroom suspension, counselor, social worker, detention center, in a facility, nurse, office, enrolled in a special program, work permit, state district testing, work study, early completion, field trip. Tardies wouldn't because they're not considered an absence at that point. So all of those are excluded from the chronic.
So field trips are excluded? Okay.
Excluded, there you go. So the robotics kids are not on that list.
Okay.
Those absences for that would not be a part of that.
Okay.
Thank you for
Can
that.
I just ask
Yeah.
real quick, how can we tell from this? I mean, it says excused, but if you're
From which?
field trip, I'm picking on field trip.
Oh.
So it's used when a student's not in class but is out on a school-sponsored activity, blah, blah, blah. But your definition of chronic was excused and not excused.
If you go to the grid, keep scrolling.
I'm on the grid. Okay,
Find where it says field trips.
yes, I did.
And so it says no on the second column from the right.
I'm not sure I have that page.
This is
Do you want me
the bottom
to
of the
try and
50-page document,
Which page?
the bottom of the 50-page document.
Okay,
Yeah.
while you are looking at that, I'm going to turn to
We'll
Director
move on,
Carey.
please.
Director Carey.
I just need a bunch of terms defined for me, both on this page and the next page. So starting with this graph, we have a truncated y-axis here. So I just remind me, when I see math scores ranging from 700 to 760, because I sometimes, and I'm sure the public who's watching can get confused too, I sometimes get puzzled and I don't always know when I'm looking at, you know, a raw score versus like a growth percentile versus something else. So if I'm looking at a graph that says math score ranges from 700 to 760, help me understand what I'm looking at.
Dr. Khalid.
Thank you. So it's a raw score. So scale score is the raw score that's earned on the CMAS. 740 is the cut point related to meets grade level expectations. Generally, there's a little bit of wiggle room depending on grade. And that is correlated to a percentile. But what you're seeing here right now is just simply continuous scale score.
Okay,
So where would you draw the line at standard or grade level?
740.
740, thank you.
Okay, so 7, and is that true for ELA as well? That
Yes.
740
Yeah, they
is
standardize
meets or
it.
exceeds expectations? Okay, that helps. And then this I'll get to on the next slide. Can you go one slide further? Okay, so we just talked about what it means to be chronically absent, and there's some discussion of how field trips play into that. Help me understand what the other terms mean. So when you say district attendance rate, what is that a rate of?
Students marked present.
On like the median day? So at any given day across the district, I would expect 88.68% of students to be there.
State regulation requires us to break it down to the smallest reporting period possible, and that's our period. So at the elementary level, that's easy. There's an AM and a PM. At the secondary, it's really dependent on what their schedule looks like, and that's varying from school to school.
Okay, so the time frame is a period, but the upshot is at any given period, I would expect approximately 89% of students to be there. That's right?
Yep.
Okay, and then what do we mean when we say truancy rates?
The definition for that is if a student misses 4 days in a calendar month or has 10 total days or more of missed school of unexcused.
And this is the percent of students who meet that over our total
And
student.
or it also includes both, if you have 4 in a month and 10, but.
Gotcha, and then the count is just the raw number.
Correct.
Okay, but that answers my question, thank you.
And can I address I apologize, I uploaded a more condensed version of this, but this is a document to support schools. So this one was 13 pages long, and it was kind of suggested that maybe we shrink it down for tonight, but it is a tool that has been messaged out, and it's on our website and a resource for schools to use to help make sense of it, because there is a lot of boxes and really schools don't have to manage that, right? These get pulled out of our data on the back end and sent to CDE, but it was provided. I wanted to make sure that schools knew what they were working with, right? So they need to know how it's defined in order to kind of target and be able to adjust any interventions and things like that.
So do you want to go to the policies and the revisions?
We have more slides. Let's get through the slide deck to
Are there
get
any
there.
more
We
slides?
got excited when we saw numbers.
Yes.
I didn't, sorry. So we all did.
Not working.
How's that affect?
I did something and she's fixing it.
There we go. Yep.
So this is just, as we often do, take a look at these data based on area. So it's a breakdown by area. So again, to Director Carey's question, and thank you for saying that because it does get very confusing which number we're talking about. So those first two numbers are against scale score, just to correlate back to that previous scatter plot. But to give that some better context, the next two numbers are percent passing. So that's that 740 or above, is that how that goes to scale score? And then compared to attendance rate overall by region. So basically, the big takeaway is that some of our highest, the West and the Northeast are leading the way in both metrics related to attendance and percent passing.
Passing relative to the 740 benchmark or passing?
Passing relative to the 740.
So these 747, okay, so these are averages.
Average, correct.
These are
These
not
are mean
means,
scale.
these are averages. Tracking, thank you.
And this is for this year's data, the attendance or?
Attendance related to, so these are 23 CMAS, so it's the equivalent.
It was last year's data.
Yeah, last year's data.
And last year's attendance.
We wanted to make apples to apples.
Right, if you go back to the previous slide, and maybe there is an easy answer if you go back to the previous slide. We say the district attendance rate is 88.68. And go to the next slide.
That was, oh, go ahead, I see. So the average doesn't average.
Yeah, it doesn't
Well,
average.
careful. This is not distributed, population will not be distributed evenly. So it's not as simple as taking 92, 91, you gotta recognize they're all gonna be weighted by their population
I
size.
can't take the average of the average.
Divide by 5, it's not gonna get you the population within each.
You would need to take a weighted average, and I don't know
Well,
what the right
I
populations
think
are.
Dr. Malpackham's point is that there is no number there that's lower than the number on the
Yeah.
previous page.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
Right, so.
Okay.
We'll figure out the error in that, but what we reported to the state is well below what is the state expectation and well below what is our expectation, particularly in the classification of trying to close the gap. You know, we've drawn the slide 100 times. More quality and more quantity are ways. Now, that doesn't mean longer school day. I'm not saying Saturday school, but every time we degrade a student's opportunity to be in class for the minimum that the state is asking for, the idea of closing the gap is that much harder. We're losing that opportunity.
Okay.
And so quantity and quality can be measured in different ways, but that XY axis says we are well below the state. And on the bottom of that slide, go back one, we did also break it down by the difference between elementary, middle, and high school. And elementary school attendance, not as high as high school, middle school attendance, but both at that 92 to 95 threshold, and then high school being just a little bit below that.
And now looking at it, it also says D11 CMAS grades 3 to 8. So maybe these attendance rate are only from 3 to 8 and excludes high school.
Yes, which could account for the difference, yeah. Because it would be the CMAS years, and those are the only grades that CMAS has taken.
Yep.
This slide really is just a support for our conversation tonight. The notes on the side kind of give a big picture of the changes or recommendations. So I'm not going to cover much more than it's there as a support tool to kind of help guide the conversation. And then this gets into our JHB policy, which we've had lots of iterations. I was here in the fall talking about attendance policy, and this was one of the deeper conversations. And so just kind of calling out upfront some of the possibilities. And we'll go further into the policies and feel free to ask questions. But the previous stated truancy is at the top. And I've come up with two options that I'm proposing or potentially recommending. Option A is connected directly to the state definition in terms of state definition of the requirement. We can go more stringent, which is similar to what we had previously. And then option B is kind of somewhere in between, trying to have a 25% mark versus the 50%.
So to clarify, our previous D11 truancy policy is more stringent than A and B. A state level base, B is a blend between that.
So when you think about how we send our data to the state, it's based off of absences. So on the back end, when they pull the data, they're just searching our system for anything that says A for absent, and they're gonna pull that and do the formula and do the math, get sent off. When we have our policies as it is now, when a student is absent for, let's say, 11 minutes at the secondary level, that would turn into an absence. And once it gets turned into an absence in the system, it gets pulled out and calculated in terms of the attendance.
So in a way, us being more strict in policy could skew the way data is reported to the state. So something to weigh on the statistics
And
side.
it's also what other school districts are doing, then we are not comparing apples to apples.
Yeah.
Some districts doing.
Good question.
I didn't do a lot of searching, but the couple that I looked at typically, and if you look at CASB, and that's, I'll get into that as we move forward, but CASB calls out the 50%. So it really doesn't get into the details in terms of additional stringencies.
And the other thing with that, Mike, all for the stringent part of it, but let's say at the secondary level, if a student misses 10 minutes and the 12th minute he or she is going to be marked absent, and the students know about this, they're going to just say, like, why do I need to go to class if I'm already going to be marked absent, as opposed to the 50%? So
Yeah, I think for the sake of the discussion, the principle of what we're discussing tonight is obviously that it's important that kids are in school.
Yeah.
Right? That's the governance piece of
Yeah.
what we're trying to say. We want children to be in school. Parents who drive your kids via vehicle or district transportation, it's on you to get your kid to the bus stop. It's on me as a dad to get my kid to the entry of the door before they close it and say, gotta check him in, he's tardy. And then how that actually then gets related is operations of Mike and your team to solve. So I think if we're being stringent of saying this is the definition and we're in a way then shooting ourselves in the statistical foot, let's just call it option A, state reg, as policy principle, and then allow Mike and your team, Superintendent Gall and your team, to solve this issue. Get kids to school. We need you there to learn. Like, period, dot, the end. Moving on. Like, we just gotta figure that out. But that's not for us. I can't go to schools and say, did you put that attendance in there right in our school? That's not my job. That, but we can say, here's state, reporting. We're gonna report that so we're consistent with state standard or law, but then operation side figures out how to get kids to school.
So are you looking for us to give like a thumbs up on, yep, option A, put that's what we wanna change our policy to?
Yes, and I don't know that now's the right time.
We are discussing.
Why not?
Kind of moving through the actual policy review part, and I think that would
Yeah, it'll
If
come
there
through the
is,
formal process.
just more of a highlight of having some discussion up front.
But this will give you the direction to then update for what to bring to us.
So you heard Director Jurgensen's point of view.
Can I add another data point, David? Can you, we don't have a slide for it, can you summarize, I can't even call it a pilot program, we just took like a 3-week sample at some high schools and gathered data from kids coming in late. So some of this stems from, again, I live and I run by Palmer all the time. At 7:35, nobody's walking quickly down the street. At 7:45, nobody's walking quickly down the street. At 7:50, nobody's walking quickly. Kids make an ant's way into the school. There's no urgency around, there's 30 seconds until the bell rings. There's no, and we've all seen the 80s and the 90s movies about what it meant to be in high school when our generation was there. Like the bell drove, you were there. And so,
Right?
So I don't have the data, but David collected some data, and I'd love for him to share some anecdotes of what kids were telling us about that sense of urgency for learning. So I want to balance. It's certainly on us to get the regulation right once you get the policy, but the larger thing we want to solve is how we get more kids in that upper right-hand quadrant of the original R squared, which is if you're in school and you see that value in school, you get that return, which is measured by the state by that raw 740 score or greater. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, so this was just, we could put some iPads at the front with the attendance clerks, that's not the right term, but the attendance person. And students had voluntary opportunity to fill out this survey. So we had about 872 responses, pretty equal, but the majority from Mitchell. They cited the reason for them being late, predominantly traffic or transportation delays. We did have another. And on most of those others, it was, these were teenagers, blaming their parents in some form or fashion. So it just, so clearly these were non-driving students that were dependent on someone else to bring them, and they cited that as one of the biggest things. This coming in a far second was challenges with morning routine. Probably the most interesting, what caught our attention, the question was, considering your arrival time today, do you feel that being late has an impact on, and then please select all that apply. So the one is academic performance, your relationship with teachers, your relationship with classmates, you experienced no noticeable impact. And it was pretty much, it started out being the vast majority you experienced no noticeable impact. That started probably a little, comes out about 50 votes more than your academic performance. So coming in first is students don't notice any noticeable impact. So.
Of showing up late.
That's what, yeah. So.
And to the transportation piece, the data that we get from the transportation department is our buses are not arriving late. So transportation from the student perspective is just my means of getting from my domicile to the school, not the big yellow bus was late.
Correct.
It's not, and we can produce that data, but that's not the red herring in there of, oh, yellow buses are late to Mitchell.
Right.
It's traffic, which means that the planning of the urgency to get to school is not there in the way that at least, and I really hate sounding like the old man at the table, just the way it was some time ago, which was the bell meant something.
Right.
And so wherever the board lands on policy, we would also like to hear direction from the board on how you want us to move regulation, that kids should be moving with urgency towards that bell. And maybe it's the warning bell and then the bell, and there are different ways we can come up with those ideas. But this idea that being in school is your part of the deal, and our part of the deal is that you do feel the urgency of wanting to be there and not, it doesn't matter if I'm here.
You're not talking just getting to school, right? You're talking even like in the secondary level, once you get there, you still have to get to class on time.
Right.
And there's a large portion of kids that waltz in whenever they feel like it, and there's no sense of urgency to get into class. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm late.
So let me ask, either in policy or in practice, are there any consequences for students who are late?
Depends on the teacher.
Why does it depend on the teacher?
It's teacher discretion. It's the same thing with cell phones, teacher discretion.
And the policy is even written in that way, penalties, when you go to the policy level, the penalties are maybe imposed, but nothing where it's consistent or at least stated there. So it's up to school as to whether they impose any penalties or not, and there is no consistency. Yeah.
So as a,
I'm sorry, the penalty doesn't usually have much teeth to it.
Yeah.
So, well, then you have to spend a lunch detention with your teacher, or a lunch detention and in-school suspension. And for the vast majority of kids, they're like, no, okay, so.
So I'm puzzled by this, because I can certainly understand giving area superintendents or giving principals or giving, teachers at the classroom level discretion and flexibility. What I can't understand, and I'm hoping that I'm just misinterpreting this, is the district basically not defining consequences at all and just leaving everything up to be made up by people lower in the system. Are we really in a position where the district doesn't outline consequences for things in policy? We don't do that?
For this, you can look at the policy, it's all attached out there. I'm trying to pull it up to read the language for you. It just says something like penalties, consequences, but it's up to, it doesn't define anything out there clearly as to what that is.
So
Probably
The
it's in,
student code of conduct and handbook, so that's kind of the public facing, it's on board policy that outlines some of the expectations. We have additional discipline policies. State law allows there to be consequences. You cannot out of school suspend or expel a student for being tardy or truant. But other disciplinary options are available, but we don't have a matrix that requires every student to be lunch detention or loss of privilege, or we don't have anything that requires that across the board.
No, and that's typical in other districts. It is really typically done, just like Director Heffley was saying. Hafley, I apologize, Director Hafley. By school, based on in connection to their learning structure and the structure of the day and different pieces that they have in place connected to staffing. That is common, that is typical. And it's typical from my experience from being in other districts and working with other districts.
but if you are habitually truant, which is that 4 days in a calendar month, then you can initiate the
Truancy
judicial
court,
process.
and that's in the policy recommendations, and then say it
Yeah.
is also in
So
state
that's
law.
the consequence with it. You can go to a truancy court, and I don't know how effective that is.
It's not.
Okay.
But straight up, it's just not.
Okay.
And so while we all believe very strongly in the correlation between attendance and achievement, the other thing that's important here is it's very easy to just make this a student didn't set their alarm early enough. A lot of our kids have real challenges in the existence of the life that they live right now. But the point being is if we can get clarity and not just say it's hard for kids, tell me that you have to drop your sibling off at another school and we will change your schedule. Tell me that you have to drop your sibling off at another school and I'll tell you that we have an adult that's at that school at 7 a.m. and we can create a care relationship with the parent that allows the student to be dropped off an hour early before school starts. Get the data, because right now what my summary is that life is harder now than it was in the glory years that I just gave you, but we don't have the data to then tell us how to solve it. So instead of prioritizing how to get that data and then how to solve it, we just end up excusing it. And then that either gets taken advantage of or the problem is so large that we haven't really thought strategically enough about how to solve it, right? And so I think the data point, without ever placing blame or knowing what the solution is, the data point is what's so critical. Our leniency on just tardiness and our lack of clarity of what's driving the extremity in the numbers, it leaves us without a lever to pull right now.
And
Director Nelson had her hand first. Director
If
Nelson.
you wanna.
well, I was just saying, data points that we've talked about or that have come up is 5E and some of the panorama data. And so how well are kids feeling like they want to be at school and how connected are they and where's that association or belief that they have? And I think those are some data points that could be pulled into where the attendance issues in terms of their own choosing may not be at school.
So just so that to help us keep track on the slide that's up there, you're looking for feedback from us on if you would like if we would like for you to update policy, which will go through normal policy process, but you need guidance on which way to go. To me, it makes sense to go with option A. Let's follow what probably most other districts are doing and what state defines attendance or absenteeism to be. But then also recognizing that sort of goes opposite the direction of what that conversation we just had was. And so to Director Carey's point that we as a board can now then task the superintendent with come up with some common consequences that are across the district that we expect students to arrive on time. And yes, the what ifs, the offhand little things, we will address those with students if they're giving their students a ride. But it does say in policy JIC number 5 that this policy is to serve as a guide for district employees and community members regarding reasonable and appropriate interventions and consequences for unacceptable behavior and attendance. Now, those consequences are not defined in this document. As you mentioned, they're in that student handbook, which I don't know like how effective or efficient that is for staff. If they're needing ideas on what acceptable consequences are, they have to go dig in this other how many page long document. So there could be some efficiencies there, but I guess I'll just pose to the team, like, can we first move on with, are you guys good with adopting option A? So we have that answered, and then we can keep moving the conversation forward. And
Director Bankus, do you have anything to add?
I don't know if you want to address that first, but as I'm listening to this opportunity for students and their parents to form relationships so that if a sibling has to be to school earlier and all, it takes me, and hopefully this isn't a rabbit hole, but I noticed when I was still in schools is that in the afternoon, and if I had afternoon middle school classes, half my kids would be gone because mom or dad would be picking up elementary, then coming to pick up the middle school child to take them home, and I can't teach them if they're not there. So we're talking about absences and truancies, but we haven't included in this those students who fall into that bucket as well of being picked up early because transportation is an issue. Because there is only one car or whatever else the situation may be. So that's kind of a rabbit hole of
Okay.
where we
Well,
are.
by the direction of the board, what I would offer is we would take the last semester of the year, the last quarter of the year, and do a very large data collection. I don't know if I would commit to every school, but I think we would get a good cross-section of schools that we do deep analysis and collection of data and following up with surveys to get the real, which rabbit hole do we need to go down, right? And get clarity to then start next year with a set of regulations that says this is the expectation. And it's not just students, it's also then parents. As the board has communicated so strongly in wanting parent voice in schools, that parent pledge that we have, that partnership, then says we need this. Because, we're still recovering from telling families for 2 years that their children could attend school at home online. And now we're making a big deal, not because the data shows it, that every percentage point of attendance in the building is either positively or negatively impacting a child's score. Where we still have families that are like, well, for a year and a half, you just logged on, and if you didn't log on, you caught the recording afterwards, and now it's like, my kid's 5 minutes late and it's a big deal. Like, that's a whole messaging campaign on, we believe in the brick and mortar experience and the exchange of information in as much face-to-face opportunity as possible, if that's the direction of the board. But I do think the real task for us as the administration is let's get some real data, not anecdotal, because every one of us has got a story, but let's collect some real data by regions, by school types, with consistencies, days of the week, so on and so forth, and they're gonna play out exactly like the national averages, so, I know Tamara's nodding at me because she's done this work before, but it will rest better with us to know what that data is, to give us the right strategies to go forward.
So
And
now,
so-
going back to the slide, so that we can keep this conversation moving along, we have an executive session too after this. Is the board comfortable going with option A at this point in time for the sake of policy and to have uniform guidance to the district on this? Okay. So
Can I
yes, go
comment
ahead.
on that though? I just wanna say that when our numbers bounce up and they look great, a year from now, every time we speak to our improved attendance rates, it needs to come with a qualifier that we change.
But it's not done right now.
And I agree completely, let's do it.
We just need consistency, but right now, schools, when I go and talk to them, different schools are recording it different ways. Some of them are doing 50%, some of them are doing 10 minutes, whatever it is. But this provides clear consistency, and that's got to be more than anything communicated to all these people at the school level, whoever it is that's keeping attendance, if that's the attendance clerk in the front office or whatever it is. Okay. And just one more clarity on it. How do you record attendance in schools right now? Is it in Power School?
Yes, in the sense, and so to add to that comment, it's if this isn't gonna take place until the policy is effective, March, April, there's not a lot of time that this practice that's gonna potentially be changing in terms of changing the overall data. There'll be a little bit of an asterisk, but it's not gonna be for the entire school year.
But every teacher records attendance in Power School at the beginning of a period. Is that what the practice is?
That's the expectation,
That's the
yes.
expectation. It doesn't always happen like that. Sometimes when you're expected to be teaching bell to bell. When you're bell to bell, you can't really stop and take attendance. So what you do is you can take attendance by exit tickets on the way out. And then so teachers will put in attendance for earlier classes during their lunch period. That happens sometimes.
But
Not
then how
always.
do you know if a student came in 50% after the time or if you are the exit ticket?
If that's the expected, if that's the expectation for teachers, so then what they'll do is they'll jot it down on a piece of paper as they're going through. It's not that they just, well, I think I remember. The teacher's really great about that.
Yeah.
It's just maybe not timely at the beginning of the period, because then you can't teach bell to bell.
Yeah.
And
But then,
whoever's supporting in the front office, they're also monitoring that and following up with teachers that haven't turned in their attendance. And so, there is kind of some checks and balances of, we gotta get this done, so that the schools have that in place.
the clarity, with that is what's going to happen, and I know that teachers have to teach bell to bell. But if a student is 5 or 10 minutes late and the teacher isn't recording attendance until lunchtime, then the parent is not notified that that student is late for that class. And so, you know, we don't know, if the student is just cutting class, or did the student on the way to school, I'm talking about the worst case scenario, somebody nabbed the kid or whatever it is.
So there's definitely an accountability piece to this. We haven't really gotten there, but I am not confident that if somebody were to ring a bell at a certain minute of the day, that I could get within 90% accuracy of the actual kids in all of our buildings, right? And so there's this accountability piece. Chris, do we default to positive attendance or?
Yes. So it says that everybody's here, and when we take attendance, we're pulling out and changing a present to absent.
Right.
Yeah, and I would just like, I apologize for the side conversation we were trying to follow up on, because I understand Director Hastey that what you were saying, that can happen, but I think those instances are fewer and far between. It's pretty simple and
It's the
easy.
exception, not the rule.
And
That's
I was
right.
just verifying that with Chris, who his office supports attendance, and yeah.
Director Bankus, you had.
Following up with your comment as well. So if attendance is 50% of the day in elementary school, that means the entire elementary day. So if we're not taking attendance until 11:30 in the morning.
No, I
then
think
the
it's
child-
morning and
Morning
afternoon.
and a PM requirement in elementary school right now.
So they record attendance in the morning and they record attendance in the afternoon.
So in an elementary school, then 50% of the day would be a couple of hours after school starts?
Yes, in the morning.
I'm certainly not trying to project that I think teachers are not taking
No,
attendance.
that's not what
right?
I'm saying. I'm concerned, kind of what you had said before. I'm concerned about parents who think their elementary student is in school, and the little person comes to school and has something happen, and they're mad, or they don't want to be in school and they leave. We don't know for another 2 hours by the attendance that teachers are taking, where when we take roll in the morning or right after lunch, we know that kids at least walked into the door. There's always a concern about walking from your classroom to a special and then back again, and you're not taking attendance, the teacher's ready to teach. Oh, and the child's not there, and the parent calls and says, my kid's home, you didn't call and tell me. It's a concern.
Accountability is definitely something we will consider in the data collection that we go on, because it is a concern for me that I worry when we've had police responses to schools where everybody's running around comparing notes of who we think or we don't think is in the classroom. Fortunately for us, those have all been de-escalated and diffused and turned out to have been false alarms. But when you get, and again, you just have to read the news, when you get into that scenario, accountability is the hardest part about that. It's the hardest part. You're like, how many people are in Miss Acevedo's classroom right now? Because we had a SWAT response at Doherty. You have SWAT outside wanting to know how many people are in there and who do you think is the threat or is not the threat. And particularly in that instance, this is why accountability is such an important part. It was a misidentification. We had a misidentification of a student because nobody was really sure who was or who wasn't. And for John McCarron's not here, so I'll just call it $1 million a year for our power school relationship. We ought to be able to snap a chalk line any second and know who's in the building and who's not. We have scan cards. Somebody would tell me, I don't know if they're all still here anymore, but tomorrow we're launching the visitors technology in all the schools. So it's not paper signing anymore. You gotta scan yourself in. Those people will be upset about those things, but they're about accountability, and safety in schools is directly related to attendance because of the accountability piece. It's not really what we're talking about here, but we won't let it go.
You had your hand up.
Well, I would really love to circle back to my kind of broader level concerns about consequences in general. But I'm also aware that's something of a subject change. So if there's other things we gotta follow up on, I'm happy to hold my
I
thoughts.
just have a quick question. I want to make sure I understand this. A student who is absent more than 50% of any attendance period during a scheduled school day. So on the block schedule, 110-minute classes, does this mean that if they're late 45 minutes,
Yeah.
they're still considered present?
They're
Yeah.
tardy.
That's what it is.
That's a
So-
huge
So
chunk.
that's why we've offered the 25%. as an alternative of stricter than the state and less stringent than the 10 minutes that we have right now, but consistent to, it's clear to me that the board wants to be, well, I don't want to put words in the board's mouth. The administration wants to be strong on kids seeing the value of being in class. It's very difficult to think that a child could get the material needed to show academic performance by showing it 49 minutes into every hour and a half long block period and getting credit for that.
So just quickly on that, the only
Well, I'm
concern
supporting
with that
you.
is, yeah,
Is what I was trying to make.
we gotta have a definitive time. When you put 25% of any attendance period for 110 minutes, it's 27 and a half minutes. Asking teachers, hey, 28th minute, see which student is in the class or not, it just creates it's the same thing with 55 minutes, but
It's 6 and 1/2 dozen the other. I mean, it's, they're 10 minutes late or they're 11 minutes
Yeah.
absent, you know?
yeah, just creating a uniformity throughout the district and also with surrounding school districts when we report. Our data looks so distorted right now by the information that we are reporting and the stringency of it, that and all.
So I guess that's where, what are we trying to get at? Like, do we wanna look good to the state and follow what their definition is, but can we follow their definition and still enforce consequences to not allow a student to be 45 minutes late? I personally think we can. I think we can be comparable to surrounding districts in what our numbers look like, but we still have expectations that you're gonna be in class by a certain time, and if you're not, there's consequences. Now, I'm not a teacher, I don't know if that would be confusing, that I know I mark it this way in the system, but I am allowed to give a consequence if they're like, more like option B, or is it 10 minutes late, you know? That's not for us to figure out, that's for the superintendent. What she said. To figure out what that line is of when the consequences system-wide are going to be applicable and what those consequences are, so I don't know
That's
if I
where
should
the-
wait till he comes back, because
Where the tardiness falls, they are tardy. If they are 45 minutes late, they are tardy to that class. They are not marked absent, but they are tardy to the class. So do we attach consequences to tardiness? That's not acceptable.
Right.
I
So-
think we should.
Yes, we should, that's what I'm saying.
But so I think, yeah, to Director Carey's point, we need to start having consequences like that are system-wide and I guess.
Consistent.
And JK, I mean, again, it's in language that they can.
Yeah.
But it's not there isn't policies that says it is required for a student who is tardy to have X consequence.
Right, so I guess, I don't know how to do this, but
Can I jump back in?
yeah, sure.
Okay, cause this was kind of the driving force of what I was trying to get at earlier. So I'm fervently hoping that I'm misunderstanding what I'm being told right now. Because I'm looking at policy JKR, for instance, and I see that there's a list of, ways to classify different behavior infractions. There's a short list of potential responses to student behavior. I can certainly, like I said earlier, I can certainly understand wanting to give principals, or even down to the level of the individual classroom instructor, discretion. What I can't understand is that we do not have a architecture in place for how this is meant to work. So you mentioned earlier that this is something that historically and in terms of practice is left up to the building. So now let me ask you this. If I were to get on the phone and call, Darian Latimer at Madison and I say, can you break down for me, would he have a rigorous approach? Would every principal have a rigorous approach for when this happens, here's our expected consequence.
What's their
When this
nature?
happens, here's our expected consequence.
Yeah, and I'd love for Chris to chime in here. I think yes, every school leader would have an answer for how they address attendance issues or makeup of work, that type of thing at their building. It's going to look different based on the age of the student and the grade band. So at an elementary level, and Chris, you probably can get better examples from current, but at an elementary level, if students are missing there's direct connection with school teachers about making work up, and sometimes they have to come in for additional instruction to be able to do it. So the emphasis is on making up the academics that you missed. That's the emphasis. At the high school level, there may be things in place, again, like at a lunchtime. I've heard of other things in the past. I'm not quite sure if it's been our practice here, but I think in some of our opportunity schools, there's been some Saturday type things available, but there are different places. The whole point is the implication that it has on academics, just like we were saying with the data. So if you're not there and you miss content and you miss assignments, it's going to reflect in your grade. And you can't graduate if you're not competent in academic areas. So consequences are tied to ensuring that you have the academic component met. That's how we do it with attendance. Chris, can you give some examples by grade band?
Yeah, I mean, one question that I think about is what is the purpose? Are we trying to provide kind of that consequential punishment? Are we trying to do more of the instructional teaching, supporting, and getting them the content that they might have missed, whether that be elementary through high school? And so, elementary, a lot of the presumption is that students are relying on their parents to get them to school, right? If they're missing at the elementary level and they don't live within the bus boundaries, they're relying on their family to get them to school. So in my particular case, there weren't a lot of consequences issued for elementary students who were tardy. We did a lot of phone calls, communications, supports, getting them caught up academically for things that they may have missed. At the secondary level, there's more practice in terms of that consequential side of you're gonna kind of owe some time and do that at lunch or after school or on Saturday.
An advisory.
An advisory, you have to go back during an advisory period to the teacher's class that you might have missed to get caught up. So there are those factors that are in place. The other question that you brought up was, is there a matrix? And there is a matrix. That's not policy. Again, we're here talking about policy and what are the practices. And our office, our department has historically, for years, had lots of supports in terms of the practice side of what does this policy look like and can it look like. And so the matrix for consequences has been created to make sure that we don't violate law. So there's kind of bans to make sure that certain areas are blacked out, that we shouldn't do that for this behavior because that wouldn't be appropriate. But it's there as a tool for the decision makers, administrators, to provide appropriate and reasonable consequences for student actions.
And intervention, right? So like some of that in terms of how Chris's department helping to support implementation. It's about what interventions can you put in place with a family or a student to help support them coming. We've had things, we've heard responses from kids, this is the exception, at least of what I've heard rather than the rule, but there are things like, I don't actually need to go to the whole period, let's say in the block period, because I can go for half the period and I can get caught up right that. The amount of work is not, it's not rigorous enough. They don't use that exact same language, but that's the idea, right? So like the intervention we need to do is work with them on that. Okay, we don't have the right balance of let's talk to you about that. Let's so like that's work and support that Chris's team does. That's work and support the school leader does. So I guess I just want to say, Dr. Carey, I don't disagree with you that there definitely needs to be interventions. And maybe I misunderstood, like there are definite district-wide ways we approach helping to support schools. But there are also very individual ways of how things are enacted at the school level based on the community needs and the level of student.
So what I'm hearing is that, first of all, we got to summarize this so we can move on, and we haven't even come to the policy itself, which are attached at the bottom of it. attendance matters, like what Superintendent Gall said, and we decided on that option A at this time as far as the policy goes. But by implementation through the superintendent, we want to make sure that there is more teeth to this at the school level, okay? Whether that matrix that you were talking about, if it doesn't belong in policy, maybe that is a clear instruction to all the building administrators that they've got to have some type of teeth attached with this. Tardiness, absences, chronic absenteeism, that we communicate this proactively. I don't know if messages go out to the parents as students approach that habitually truant threshold. Whatever it is that is necessary, we need to put that in. And if Superintendent Gall can also collect that data that you were talking about and bring it to the board. And then with the policy itself, which if you go to the next slide, and the slide after that. Yeah, and go to the next slide. I think there is a whole bunch of policies that are attached up here with the regular clean version and the red line version, okay? If the board has some clarifying questions that you need to direct to the people on the table to help you understand some of the language in the policy, please do so at this time. Otherwise, if you have specific input itself for the language change or anything of that matter, I would suggest that you reach through email, provide that feedback to Chris and the team up there, and maybe you copy the rest of the board in on it too, so we are aware of what the changes that are being required in place, so that you can capture that and bring it to us at some point in time. So with that, do you guys have any clarifying questions on the policy that are in place? There are JH, JHB are the primary policies, JH being attendance, JHB being truancy. And then you had JLI, is it JLI? IB, which is the, what was that, closed door or what?
Closed campus, student dismissal.
Okay.
So just to set the stage, if I can for a quick second, that using your guiding principles in terms of having this be aligned with state statute, I really started with CASB's policies because they have it all spelled out and kind of have annotations in terms of which aspects of each policy is required by law. And so that was really kind of a starting point of how is CASB's outlined versus our current D11, and then trying to additionally reduce the overall policies, which I believe is another guiding principle for the board, and trying to, that's where revisions and kind of merging of some of them happened. But I believe most of the meaning from the current board policy is included in what is recommended, but it looks similar to what CASB has. And so the last one, the JLIBR, are a lot of details, and that's what D11's board had previously, but that's only if needed. The CASB JLIB, I believe, is kind of more guiding and broad, where if you guys as a group feel like that it's necessary to have all of those details, I'm suggesting that you would bring our current policy in under as a regulation to support the CASB essentially language on the recommended JLI.
And I understand what you're saying. You wanted to align the policies with CASB, but just as an example for JLIB, now it doesn't define what an open campus and a closed campus are. Those exceptions that were there has been completely removed. So if we adopt the policy as it is right now, you won't allow for an open campus and high school for lunch as the current policy allows. All that language has been removed, so then high schools cannot have an open campus around lunchtime. We just need to, maybe CASB policy doesn't address that, but we got to make the policy adapt to our specific instant in our school thing. And the second thing quickly, my question would be, one of the feedback from the board was, as you assemble this policy and put together these revisions, reach out to stakeholders. You were charged, in this case, you being the point of contact, were charged, if it is necessary, to have a committee out there in making those revisions. So these revisions, did that come just from you? Have principals been contacted in revising these policies at this time?
The primary recommendation came from the student engagement department. So I have had conversations with principals at other conversations at the middle school discipline task force, at our student engagement task force that's tied to the discipline process master agreement. So these conversations have been brought up, but in terms of formalized meetings, the turnaround on the request to when those naturally occur did not allow for a more formalized sit-down voice, but more in that kind of conversational way.
Okay. Any clarifying questions? Director Nelson?
I have two. So am I understanding correctly, the point of today was to say we have a problem with absenteeism and you're gonna come back to us with how to address it later after you do some data search? Is that correct?
I think we're getting to the same place. The point of today is a policy committee recommendation had come forward on attendance some weeks ago, of which we pulled because it didn't have direction of the board of where they wanted policy to go. So now we're getting direction of where we want policy to go. That is going to require more data collection for us to operationalize that data. But this is getting the cart in front of the horse on the policy committee decisions that the board had made, what was that, about a month or two ago?
It was in the fall.
So I appreciate that.
And this happens to be the example, which is
Yeah, to answer
attendance
that
policy.
question that you brought about, Director Nelson, this was our charge to them to bring that policies, because this was the request of the board. Instead of it going to the policy committee, the board wanted policies out here, and so that's why all the policies are there. So
Yes,
we
I
wanted to
understand.
do the nitty-gritty work and invest the time.
I understand, so I appreciate that was the desire. This was loaded yesterday afternoon and I didn't learn about that until I was driving here. So there hasn't been time for us to review any of this, to be able to give meaningful feedback in this conversation. And so I just.
We're happy to
know-
delay, we're
Well, that-
moving,
we're
if we
gonna-
come back in a work session after the board's been able, so we can pause on taking action and let the board be able to digest that more.
I guess
was-
I would just recommend that we still can take action, we still need a plan. And that's what I thought this was, we would be giving a thumbs up of, we task the superintendent to now come up with the how we're going to address absenteeism. And that may incorporate what consequences there are for parents. We don't have very much leverage. We don't have any leverage with parents. They're responsible for getting their children to school. So what avenues can we take if they do not take that responsibility seriously? And I understand there are situations in life, we're not gonna talk about the exceptions, but so just I want to understand that going forward, you will come back to us with a plan of how we're gonna address absenteeism. And then now the board will have to go in and look at these edits to the policy to be able to actually give direction if we agree with them or not, because this was not loaded in enough time for us to review.
Yeah, and fair enough that the feedback that you are providing, and there was some in the translation, the communication that happened between us when we were setting the agenda where it was loaded, there was some miscommunication. The policy and the all the revisions, the red line versions, was my understanding that was all going to be loaded on Friday. And the 4 or 5 data slides, Superintendent Gall needed extra time to put that together. And like sometimes revisions are made, those 4 or 5 slides were supposed to be added later in the week. But that is not going to change the narrative. But this was supposed to have been added in Friday. And that's where we need to make sure that the board has enough time to review it, and that by the board's agreement at this point in time, at least, that everything is loaded on Friday. And that's just a feedback to you, to the superintendent. If we can load at least that by Friday, and then minor changes, if it needs to be for that, can be added after that.
So do we need to give a thumbs up to task the superintendent, or is it like, yep, he's gonna come back to us with a plan of?
He is coming back with us with a plan. In the meantime, to speed this process along, we do have this policy in place. There are a couple of options in front of the board at this time. One, at this point in time, is the board want to send this to the policy committee for them to look at the language and bring a recommendation to the board?
I don't know,
Okay.
because I haven't had time to look at it.
Okay.
So.
Or is the board happy with, or is the board willing to devote the time to look at the policies, policy by policy, and providing the recommendation directly to Chris Brandt, so we can provide the guidance? I mean, that's kind of where we are at. If the board is comfortable looking at the policy and providing that feedback to Mr. Brandt, we can start that as a first step in the process. Is that okay with the board? If
Are
you,
we talking to us about the JHB, or are we talking about all the other ones that are attached?
all of them that are attached. Okay, all the JH, JHB, JLIB, all the policies that are attached out there.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha. So like, just thank you for the policy change summary. I referred to it over and over and over again, and because I was lucky enough to see that the change was yesterday. Thank you, Melissa, for the email. There's not that many changes. So if anybody had a chance to read the
It's a lot of moving to reduce overall policies and to align it to CASB.
Yes.
Which was the direction of the board.
And removing one regulation and attaching it with policy now.
Right, and JLIB.
And when you look at it, sorry.
Adding a regulation.
Just, there is a lot of red on some of them, and it does look like a lot of changes, but it's a lot of the already existing language, just
Moving
kind of
into another
reorganized in a different way.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it's really fair feedback and duly noted, and I'm glad that you got the opportunity to look at it. And that summary of changes document, I think when you do get a chance to look at it, you'll probably come to a similar conclusion. The purpose of this time, given all that, is to get some direction from the board. So Chris moved forward, we moved forward with the direction of the board when Greg first came to the board to talk about policy and where you wanted us to move and how you wanted to first focus on attendance and discipline. And so that's why the changes were made. So I think that makes it a little easier to review now that you can actually review it. And then the purpose of this time was to talk about where the context are we at in the data, which supports why you all wanted to focus on attendance, and then in JHB, which way do you want us to go to solidify the wording in that policy, option A or option B? We're leaving with that today, so that's good. You take a look at the summary of the feedback, give us some feedback individually on that. If it is as easy, as straightforward as Director Ott has described, then I think that's manageable and doable. As you dig into it a little bit more, if it's not, then President Malpacum can then work with Superintendent Gall, and we could add something else to the agenda for the board to dig in deeper.
Sounds good. I think you can sense my frustration that I really want to be involved in policy work, and I'm a big proponent of the board being very hands-on. That's where we're supposed to live. And so it's just hard to be prepared coming when I really want to do a good job as a board member, and I can't do that if I'm not given the information in advance. And I think having a clear understanding that there's a problem with absenteeism is important. I guess maybe I went into this with misunderstanding or wrong expectations. I thought there maybe would be a little bit more for us to chew on as far as here's how we're now going to go after that. So that, I think I'll just leave it at that.
So let me circle back again, because as the conversation keeps going, it just keeps going. So I want to focus back. Have we made a decision on JHB? On the option A or B?
Yeah, we decided, we gave that as option
Okay, well, I'm changing my
A.
vote. I'm gonna go to A. That doesn't change the majority. Excuse me, B. It doesn't change the majority, but as I process through. So that's one part of what we've accomplished. The next part of what we've accomplished, and I've heard it said, and I'm looking through all this stuff, and when I read it earlier today and walked away, came back and looked at it, and it's like, what are we really doing here? It just repeats. But what I heard you say is that it takes some of it and makes it thinner, makes the policy thinner. We're not losing anything, it's being incorporated into a specific policy that it relates to. That I can agree with, and then I'm done. Is there any conversation that comes after that?
Well, as far as the policy language itself, that's what we are talking about at this time, crafting that policy language itself, and where Director Nelson says that she's got more interest in making sure that that language, if I'm understanding right, that she wants a little bit more
Time to digest.
time to craft that policy language itself. Would that?
I just haven't read it.
Right,
I didn't know it was
agree
there.
with you. I agree with you, that's fine, and fair enough, we gave that input to Superintendent Gall. So how do we proceed from here at this point in time? The board has an opportunity to look at this policy at your convenience over the next 10 days or so, let's say 10 days, and send that feedback to Chris Brandt. Hopefully that provides you enough time. And when you do that specific policy revisions itself, copy the entire board so that we are aware of it. Now, Director Art may want to look at the syntax, the context, the grammar, all those things. Awesome. We need to make sure that our policies have the proper language in there, and you may want specific input that you want to provide after looking at it. But it's a learning opportunity for all of us, but you will have time to do what you want over the next 10 days and provide that feedback.
So just from hearing the others' feedback that knew this was here to look at it before coming today, is it safe to say we can move this to non-action after we give our feedback? Like, it doesn't need to go to policy committee?
Unless the board decides, because we always left it up to the board can kick it to the policy committee if they want to. If the board is comfortable providing
When
this
will we
feedback.
make that decision?
We can make that decision right now if the board is ready to make that decision.
That's kind of what I'm saying. Can we decide that we're comfortable with it just going to non-action?
And I
Once we-
threw that question to the board and you responded back that you haven't looked at that policy, so you cannot make that decision at this point in time.
You're right.
Okay.
But now that other directors have shared and I've gotten more information, I am now changing and saying I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, so go ahead, Jason.
So I had a couple things I can give you tonight, but only because I saw it on board docs after I responded to emails last night at around 11 o'clock. My question was, I remember at Doherty when I skipped a period, only once, because I liked being in school. I liked my teachers. There was a robo phone call that went home. And so my question was, I read through it and I was tired, but I don't see anything where it says we'll establish a system of monitoring, and notifying parents, but is there somewhere in here where we are tapping into Power School or what's available to go, the teacher marked absent and ding ding, I get texts all the time from, 66080, check your email for, important D11 news. Can we ding, the parent for Jason Jorgensen, Mr. Brandt marked Jason absent for period 2? Do we have the ability?
Currently, we have a phone call home that goes at night, but not in kind of that real time, I think is what you're asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, not anything that's currently in place for kind of that immediate real time.
Do we have the capability to do that through Power School?
With the version that we have, no.
Okay.
We might have the capability to, like, the time to do it, like when we currently send it out, we might have that, we can look at that a little bit further.
So instead of saying it auto does a call at 6 p.m., you might be able to, okay, sorry.
But we do have that. I think that gets back to maybe a little bit of Director Nelson's additional point of, and Director Carey's point about wanting more information on the actual implementation of support of, absentee practices for how we support when students are absent.
Well, this
and-
is my point. Our policies
Yes.
don't do those. Our
policies
policies do not
don't.
define
Yes,
what happens when infractions are committed.
exactly.
Well,
And
devil's
I'm
advocate.
not done going on a rant about it. I'm just biding my time.
Well, but the devil's advocate would say, nor should our policies do that.
It's
Yeah.
operational.
Well, I
That's
think
operational.
I think the space in between there is particularly as we just came to notification of parents.
Yeah.
A policy could say, because a Board of Education is committed to parental engagement, that an infraction of this policy must include notification of parent within X number of hours, or maybe not even the hours, but give us the where you want us to focus the attention. We'll figure out the Power School bridge in between that and a new D11 loop or how we contact. That's where, don't tell us that you have to use the following program to contact a parent. Say parent engagement, like let's just say the three aspects of, attendance are parent, teacher, and student. And so then driving us that there is notification to the student, notification to the parent, clarification from the instructor that lost work is made up or whatever. So the consequences can be framed in a policy without you guys stepping into operations.
Yeah.
And then give us the how we do it, but you give us the where you want us to go. And then I don't think we have this abyss that exists right now, which is 450 policies and 43% chronic absenteeism. I mean, that's the elephant in the room. We can be policy wonks all we want, but if the policy doesn't have any teeth on the administration, then my team can't come up with 450 regulations for 450 policies and manage those while instructing children.
Well, and
Because then
getting it
we're
all
just
trained.
the regulation police.
Getting all the staff trained for it,
Right.
Yeah.
Then we're here for the wrong reason. So I do think this is an opportunity, especially in the light of, we've rethought policy committee by direction of the Board of Education, that maybe this does go to policy committee that says, find the space in between, very broad, and some teeth without telling us how to do it. And I think if we then start building policies that way, because I'll just go back to the calendar. If there's a policy that says we should have a calendar every year that prioritizes these three primary functions, then we can build that calendar. Instead, we go out and build a calendar, and then it comes up and it's like, that's not what we really wanted, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, let's try and find that space in between policy being too high and then the board trying to drive regulation.
I also see it as you and your team are the ones sort of providing us with, here are the possibilities, here are the levers that we can pull, and whether you want feedback or guidance on where to focus, or you just come to us with, this is what we recommend, like this is what we, we're gonna start going back to truancy court, taking parents to court for not getting their kids in schools, I don't know what that looks like, so just putting that out there.
Do you have
I think
anything
it's the
more?
second piece that you just said. And I think that's where the responsibility rests. I'm sorry.
We just need to keep moving.
Yeah.
Jason, quickly.
The last piece there, 27 of 50 in the truancy section. I do appreciate, speaking to parents or guardians shall be required to acknowledge in writing awareness of their obligation to get their kids to school. Actually, it's not an obligation to get their kids to school, it's an obligation to furnish the school with a telephone number. So I'd like to see more teeth there where when we're registering a student for the school year, there's a parent acknowledgement of saying, the board's, and the goal of the board is to say, we need your student at school on time. And you're signing off here to say, I'm gonna get my kid to school on time. And, and if it's then below that or above that is what the administration team says, here's the policy JK or the student, discipline matrix that you have for elementary, for middle, for high school, it's applicable to each site, but it's like, look, here's the policy, or here's, how we're gonna handle infractions, and and then the parent or guardian signs off on that to say, okay, I'm agreeing to this, and that's the parent partnership we did last spring or whatever it was, school's responsibility, parents' responsibility. We gotta get kids to school on time. You're signing here to acknowledge that that's important and that you're gonna help us with that.
I think that says in that policy, JHB right now. It's got language in there that says, parents shall be notified in writing at the beginning of each school year of the obligation to ensure that all children of compulsory attendance age attend school, and parents and guardians shall be required to acknowledge.
Is that happening?
Is that part of our enrollment paperwork?
That's a language that has been added just now.
That was
It was
not-
not there in policy before.
Okay.
It's been added just now. So going forth, this would be the
Truly, this is the recommendation that we're getting, like, we're trying to follow the guidelines that we're giving for. So this is our best recommendation at this point. I think you could, if we're comfortable moving it to non-action, like Director Nelson proposed, given where we think we might be, we're already digging into, sounds like some things that get more in alignment with implementation, with the understanding that, hey, we know we have to support greater implementation at the level that might come in other documents that don't necessarily live in policy, because we don't want a million pages in policy that, right? I think we can move forward with that and adjust if necessary.
Okay, that not class with.
And I got a few of them.
Okay.
First, I want to acknowledge your issue, because if I hadn't had time, I spent the morning in schools, and if I hadn't had time this afternoon, I wouldn't have been prepared. So absolutely.
But is the board comfortable posting it on Friday, or is the board guidance, you need more time on that? If it's posted on Friday for a Wednesday meeting, are we comfortable with that?
That's what we've already agreed to.
Okay, well, which is fine, that's
Are you asking if we want more time?
Yeah, I mean, if you need more time than that, because right now, for these policy documents, if it's posted on Friday and you are ready by Wednesday, that's good enough. I mean,
Maybe
if-
that could be a separate conversation at the retreat.
Okay.
Because since we have to
Put it on the
change
agenda.
what we're already doing.
And just your question about policy committee, in a way there is no rush on these. So if we do say, let's look at it in 10 days, it's not gonna hurt us.
Yeah.
So that gives more time. A technicality, we didn't vote on options, so when you said Sandra, you said.
I thought I saw thumbs go
It was
around.
thumbs up, yes, it's an indication of where we'd wanna go. But just for anybody
Consensus, but not a
listening,
vote.
we didn't vote in the work session. When you're reading this, or when we're reading this, a question is the policies as listed in this document are you red line version and the corresponding clean version, right? It is not the existing policy.
It's a clean version of the recommended red line version without
Thank
the
you.
red line.
Which is right below
So
it.
you'd have to pull the
Yes.
current policy to compare if you wanted to do that.
Right, so as you're looking at it,
Okay.
I think that's an
Thank you.
important point, because I was like, wow, this red line version looks a lot like this
What did they
black version.
I couldn't figure that one out, yeah.
It's to call out the changes or to help call out where things are being moved or changed. And it's-
Okay, and I appreciate that. The other point, and Melissa, can you pull up the last 5 pages, like page 45 of the PDF? There's 5 pages of table. So is that part of a regulation?
The table that I was referring to,
Well, the streamlined version of the table you
neither
were-
document is a part of a regulation. Those were created out of our department to support schools and having aligned and accurate attendance taking practices.
So this is not part of any regulation or policy?
Correct.
Okay, or an exhibit, it's not in there either? Okay, all right. I think that was it. The only other thing was, we have spent a lot of time on regulations and implementations, and that, to your point, Tamara, that is all the superintendent and it's all administration, and we gotta back out of that, I think.
Agreed.
We set the policy, and then we, as the superintendent, we might be curious how he's doing it, we want to hear about the results, but it's gotta hand that back to him. Thank you. I
Okay,
am
thank
done.
you.
Is
So-
there a conversation on behavior happening at some point already planned?
I thought so.
Because I thought that was gonna be,
Serious thoughts,
I
huh?
thought that was gonna be today too.
No,
So-
it's not. It was the way it was posted, and I even mentioned that to Melissa. This was going to be just attendance, and I don't know who loaded it on board docs from your side. It said attendance and discipline out there, and
Which is what we asked for.
well, yes, but right now
We
with
said
the
we would
time.
bring them in chunks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
chance with the time constraints that we had in this meeting, even attendance is going to be a heavy lift. And so the discipline was going to come a month or so later, sometime in
Yes, I apologize for that, yeah.
So
That hasn't been,
that wasn't-
that wasn't communicated to us, that's not on you.
I was the one who posted that when we originally started thinking, I thought these policies had been so well written before by the previous director that, they would be really quick and easy to get passed, so. I put all of them in there, that way, so, so that I take ownership of that.
okay, so discipline is coming down the road, and that's how it was always scheduled, attendance and discipline. I'm sorry if that wasn't communicated to
okay.
you. It was attendance coming first and discipline coming second. But all of it happening in the same timeline by end of May. So the last question that is on the table right now is, okay, so just to bring some structure to this and final closure to this, you have the policies in front of you and take some time, maybe 10 days or so, and reply back to Chris Brandt with changes, specific changes that you would like to see, revisions that you would like to see in that. And then the follow-up question is this something that you would like to kick back to the policy committee? Superintendent Gall weighed in on that to have them take a look at it after you have provided your revisions? Or do you want it directly coming as non-action? So,
Give us which one, non-action or?
non-action, coming as non-action. Okay, did you say non-action, Tom?
I said non-action, sorry.
Okay, so then I saw 4 thumbs up out there, so it's coming directly to the board as non-action after the revisions has been made. It's not going back to the policy committee at this point in time. Okay, so with that, that summarizes it. So if you have any revisions to happen, let's set 10 days or so to get back to from today, so maybe next Friday. So that's just to say the 3/6, 3/30, 3/15 by May 15th. So to set a deadline next Friday. March 15th. By March 15th, Chris, March 15th, directors will reach out to you providing their revisions. And when you do those revisions, please do copy the rest of the board that we are aware of it. And then you can incorporate all those revisions in there in some type of version and then bring it to the board. We will schedule it as non-action sometime in April. Okay? Okay, with that, we got to move on and we got to move to our executive session. We are already kept some of our legal counsel in waiting. So let's, this meeting is officially adjourned at 6:21 p.m.